Hi, it's Katrina. If you're a fan of history, mystery, and discoveries, you're in the right place. Welcome to Origins Explained. Did you ever think that mummies walked among kangaroos or pharaohs sipped margaritas? What were these Roman coins doing in a Japanese castle? Buckle up, history buffs, because we are about to shatter everything you thought you knew. Today, we are unraveling the secrets of ancient Egyptians exploring the Americas. So grab your sunblock and papyrus scrolls because this history lesson is going global.
Egyptian glyphs in Australia?
A big question out there is, were ancient civilizations connected? Did they ever meet one another? Did the Romans make it to Mexico? Did the ancient Egyptians make it to Australia? The Egyptians had very advanced ships for their time. They used sails and oars, made robust wooden ships that were watertight, and even made warships. If the Vikings made it to North America in long ships that were about 50 feet long, why couldn't the ancient Egyptians make it to Australia with ships that were 150 feet long and even wider and deeper? Let's take a look at one of the most famous examples of why we think the Egyptians made it to Australia.
Inside the Brisbane Water National Park in Australia, there are hieroglyphs engraved on rocks. The hieroglyphs look like they belong on the interior of an ancient Egyptian temple. Many believe these strange glyphs are proof that Egyptian travelers sailed to Australia roughly 5,000 years ago. They are known around the world as the Gosford Glyphs, located near the small town of Gosford. The hieroglyphs are carved onto a pair of vertical sandstone walls. They aren't that easy to find, tucked away in a corner of the vast park.
The thing is, scientists don't think they're real. I mean, the glyphs are real in the sense that they exist, but scientists think they were made as a hoax, not by ancient Egyptian travelers.
One such non-believer is Associate Professor Boyo Okinga from Macquarie University. He said it would be wonderful if the glyphs were real, but it's just not possible. So why not? The glyphs certainly don't look fake when you're standing there staring at them. There are more than 300 bizarre symbols scrawled on the stone. Symbols of Egyptian gods, bees, chickens, and weird things. If the Egyptians didn't carve these, who did? We need answers. Boyo Okinga said there is a major chronological discrepancy. He's an expert in Egyptian hieroglyphs, so Boyo can be trusted that he knows what he's talking about. The glyphs etched into the rock are indeed Egyptian symbols, only they come from different periods in Egyptian history. Think of it in terms of the English language. Say someone found an English engraving, but the words were a jumble of modern English, Old Yi English, and even older versions of the language.
That's the problem with the Gosford Glyphs. Someone appears to have taken real Egyptian hieroglyphs that were used thousands of years apart and grouped them together.
The general consensus is that someone made the glyphs after the discovery of King Tut's tomb in 1922. It was one of the most exciting discoveries in world history, and at a time before the internet or TV. People were obsessed with ancient Egypt, and someone likely made the symbols for fun.
That doesn't mean the Egyptians didn't arrive in Australia. It only means that these glyphs most likely aren't authentic. But there is still evidence out there that the Egyptians had colonies all across the globe. More on that is coming up later, so don't go anywhere.
The secrets of Christ's halo.
Where in the world did the halo come from? The circular disc of brilliant light that hovers above Jesus Christ's head in Christian artwork is not specific to Christianity. It originated in Iran.
Since then, the halo has been used by Buddhists, Hindus, the Greeks, and followers of the ancient prophet Zoroaster. But what even is it? And why is the halo so popular? A circular aura of light around a holy figure's head is universal, though there are lots of different kinds. There are rayed halos, like the one on the Statue of Liberty. There are even halos made of roaring flame, like the ones seen in Islamic and Persian art. It's suspected the halo originated from the crown. Ancient rulers crowned themselves in a physical halo of copper or some other metal. Then, over the years, it became a symbol of divine power. The halo may have even started as divine power, seen as the energy emanating from the head of a deity. I guess the question is, which came first, the halo or the crown? Here's a theory I think you'll enjoy. Some people have speculated the halo came from the protective plates attached to the heads of ancient statues. used to protect them from bird waste. In ancient Egypt, Ra had his very own halo. He was the solar deity, depicted in artwork as wearing the sun as a crown above his head. The sun was represented by a huge circular disc. Could this have been the first use of a halo? In the city of Mohenjo-Daro, one of the old trading capitals of the Indus Valley civilization, artifacts have been found from 4,000 years ago. The artifacts show rayed auras emanating from holy figures. The rays are not only around the figures' heads, but shooting out of their bodies too.
In ancient Greece, mythological heroes were often depicted with crowns of light hovering above their heads. Historians think they were meant as signs of the hero's heavenly power.
But none of these examples are disc halos. Those didn't appear until around 300 BC. By the way, a disc halo is the same halo that Christ has. It's a hollow ring of light that hovers just above the skull.
Perhaps the first of these halos belonged to the god Mithra, the Zoroastrian religion's deity of light, justice, and divine glory. Considering this was 3 centuries before Jesus, it's safe to say Christians copied the halo symbol for their own uses. Technically, the halo is pagan.
What do the Maya have in common with ancient Indonesia?
I've already shown you a connection between Mexico and Egypt today, but there is another connection I think you need to know about. It's one between Mexico and Indonesia. Have you ever wondered why their temples look so similar? It might be something you haven't even thought of before. Here, take a look at this Maya pyramid. Doesn't it look just like its neighboring pyramid in the city of Tikal?
It does, but it isn't Mayan. I was lying. This ancient pyramid is in fact a Hindu temple in central Java in Indonesia. It's called the Setho Temple, built in the 15th century on the western slope of Mount Lawu. It's almost impossible to tell the difference between dozens of Indonesian temples and dozens of Maya pyramids. It's like they hired the same architect to build their cities. How any of this is possible defies explanation. If history is to be believed, the temple from Indonesia I just showed you was built during the reign of the Majapahit Empire. Their dominion over the island of Java lasted from 1293 to 1500. They didn't rise to power until the Maya civilization had already collapsed 300 years earlier.
Do you think the Maya traveled to Indonesia or vice versa? Who was copying whom? Let me know any exciting thoughts or theories you might have in the comments.
The electromagnetic energy of the pyramid.
The Great Pyramid of Giza can focus electromagnetic energy inside its hidden chambers. I'm not just saying this to get your attention. It's been confirmed by scientists.
Researchers have identified the remarkable electromagnetic properties of the biggest pyramid in Egypt. The structure is able to concentrate electric and magnetic energy by funneling the energy into unseen chambers beneath its base. The pyramid could theoretically store pockets of energy, converting itself into one gigantic battery. Scientists think if this effect can be recreated on a nanoscale, it could lead to a new era in technology. Scientists could use what they've learned from the pyramids to make more efficient sensors and solar cells. But is that what the Egyptians intended more than 4,000 years ago when they built the pyramid? I thought the 481-foot megastructure was made as the eternal resting place of Pharaoh Kufu. Maybe that was only one part of the pyramid's purpose. Dr. Andrei Evlyukin was the scientific supervisor and coordinator of the recent research. He and his team looked into the relationship between the pyramid shape and its ability to focus energy. The team, consisting of scientists from the ITMO University in St. Petersburg, Russia, built a model of the pyramid. Then they tested it to measure its electromagnetic response to stimuli. Their models showed that wave energy is absorbed rather than scattered when it hits the pyramid. The results showed that the hidden chambers beneath the pyramid's foundation could easily harness energy. But so could the chambers that allegedly contained Pharaoh Khufu and his wife. You should keep in mind that no bodies have ever been found in the pyramid, so there is no irrefutable evidence it was used as a tomb. You should also keep in mind that something most likely once decorated the top of the pyramid. Some think it was a pyramidion, a type of capstone. Others have suggested there was a giant golden throne at the top of the pyramid, used by an alien king to look down on their subjects. It's getting wild now.
Another theory is that there was a huge metal orb at the top of the pyramid, presumably used to harness energy like a lightning rod and channel it deeper into the structure. It could have been part of what made the pyramid a giant battery. And now for a quick break, because it's shout-out time! I want to give a huge shout-out to Kyle Brown for the generous super thanks. It really means a lot. Thanks so much for watching. If you are new here, subscribe to join the Origins Explained family.
Older than Göbekli Tepe.
Everyone is talking about Göbekli Tepe in Turkey and how it's the oldest settlement/temple/monument in the world. But nobody is talking about Bonkuklu Tarla, the town that is even older. You fans of the channel know that I talk about Göbekli Tepe all the time. How could I not? There's a lot going on.
But Bonkuklu Tarla is an enigma of its own. Whereas Göbekli Tepe has been roughly dated at between 11,000 and 12,000 years old, Bonkuklu Tarla has been dated at almost 13,000 years old. The town was constructed in the center of Turkey's Konya Plain, a fertile region rich in human history. It was lost until 2008, when scientists found it during a prospecting dig. 4 years later, in 2012, the first excavation got started. It was a huge project involving more than 60 workers. In 2017, Dr. Ergül Kodas announced that Bonkuklu Tarla was occupied in 10,000 BC, meaning it was founded even earlier. By 12,000 years ago, the town had flourished into a fully functioning city with shockingly modern amenities. You're not going to believe what archaeologists found in the ruins. This ancient town had a sewage system. They had a real sewage system for carrying filth and waste away from their homes so that they wouldn't get sick. We usually think of people in the past being pretty gross and unhygienic. Modern people were pretty disgusting until a century ago. But the people of Bonkuklu Tarla were already in the process of developing proper sewage disposal. Archaeologists also uncovered artifacts, things like simple decorative beads. They also found tools made from flint and some weapons, like arrowheads. Evidently, these ancient people didn't have advanced technology like lasers or machines, but they did have an excellent understanding of architecture and civilization. They built temples and communal dwellings. All signs point to a society that thrived together as a community, seemingly in peace and harmony. Research is still in its infancy. Still, it doesn't take a genius to see that Bonkuklu Tarla is shaping up to be the real cradle of civilization. This town and its temples predate the Sumerians, Babylonians, Egyptians, Hittites, Greeks, Romans, everyone. They might predate the Clovis culture in North America that appeared before the Ice Age was even over.
What could this mean for the history of humanity? Does it give credence to the biblical myth of the flood, seeing as Bonkuklu Tarla would have stood before God unleashed his apocalyptic torrent? Does the ancient town mean that there could really have been a global antediluvian civilization? What are your thoughts?
Roman coins in a Japanese castle.
Ancient Roman coins have been found in the ruins of an old castle. It might not be that weird if the castle was in Europe, but this was a castle in southern Okinawa, Japan. Researchers found 10 bronze and copper coins from the 4th century AD. How did they get there?
Make no mistake, this is a groundbreaking discovery. It's the first time Roman coins have been found in Japan, thousands of miles from where they were undoubtedly minted. According to archaeologist Hiroki Miyagi, at first he thought they were pennies that had been dropped by US soldiers during the war. But after Hiroki washed them in water, he realized they were way older. You can't fault Hiroki for his initial assumption of the coins being from the US. After all, Okinawa is a tropical paradise that still hosts US military bases and thousands of troops. It wouldn't be weird to find a penny. But the island is also home to some amazing ancient places, like Katsurin Castle. The castle was built in the 13th century as the home of a feudal lord. That being said, not much else is known about it. The castle was abandoned in the 15th century, the name of its owner lost to time. Researchers think the feudal lord who built the castle earned his wealth through trade. It was assumed a Japanese trader from Okinawa would have had business dealings regionally, not internationally. The Roman coins suggest otherwise. It's possible there was a trading connection between Europe and Japan that historians don't even know about. The Romans could have been sending goods to East Asia as early as the year 300, even if there are no records of it.
Hiroki Miyagi said it's also possible the ancient Roman coins came from Southeast Asia or China. No matter where they came from, finding them in the ruins of a Japanese castle is still crazy.
The Nephilim and the Anasazi.
There is a chilling connection between the ancient Anasazi people of North America and the Anakim of the Near East, the place that used to be called Canaan. Scientists are having a hard time reconciling the overlaps between these two civilizations.
And by the way, the Anasazi might have been the Nephilim from the Bible. I better start with a brief introduction to the Anasazi. The name of the ancient culture comes from the Navajo people. It translates roughly to mean ancient ones. The Navajo spoke of the Anasazi as if they were their ancient ancestral enemies. The Anasazi were culturally and genetically unique. If the legends are to be believed, the Anasazi were also hostile to other tribes in the American Southwest. The Paiute and Hopi Indians also have stories in their traditional folklore that speak of the ancient ones. For the Paiute, the Anasazi were called the Site-Ka. They were red-haired giant cannibals who terrorized other tribes until the Paiute cornered and exterminated them. Now let's move to the forgotten land of Canaan, where scholars have been trying to understand the Anakim for centuries. To give you all the details, I need to get a little bit biblical. In the Bible, Moses led the Israelites out of Egypt. Do you know what happened next? That's right, they wandered the desert for 40 years. Don't bother bringing up Google Maps to see how long it would take to walk across the Sinai Desert. I can tell you right now, it doesn't take 40 years. The Bible says that God was punishing the Israelites for their lack of faith. They were stuck in the desert eating manna provided by God and whittling away the time counting specks of sand. When their punishment was over, the Israelites exited the Sinai Desert and arrived in the Promised Land. This would have been about 3,000 years ago. The Promised Land was Canaan, controlled by various warring factions and tribes. One of those tribes was the Anakim. Just like the Site-Ka of Paiute legend, the Anakim were giants. The Bible says they were the Nephilim, the sons of Anak. God was supposed to have killed all the Nephilim in the flood, but apparently he missed a few. It was up to the Israelites to destroy the rest of the giants. So what if there was another small group of giants that had survived the flood in North America? And what if they were the Anasazi, or aka the Site-Ka? Perhaps it had been up to the Native Americans to get rid of them. It's an interesting prospect and one that could be true. In the 19th century, people across America kept finding the bodies of giants. There were so many giant skeletons dug from ancient graves that people started accepting that America had been home to remnants of the Nephilim.
Then the Smithsonian teamed up with the National Geographic Society to denounce all giant skeletons as fakes. They were very adamant about it, and now there is no evidence of these giants left.
Giant lions baffle scientists. A pair of humongous lion statues were discovered in Turkey, causing scientists to scratch their heads and say, The huge granite cats each weighed roughly 5 tons. Nobody could figure out what they were used for. Lion statues aren't unusual in the ancient world. People loved lions and were obsessed with them. The Romans were fascinated by them, and the Ethiopians practically worshipped them. Lions were kings of the animal kingdom, sacred beasts that were to be respected. These particular lions were carved to be life-sized imitations of the kingly cats, made around 1400 BC. This was 400 years before the Israelites supposedly arrived in Canaan to fight those pesky giants I just told you about. It was a time when the Hittites controlled an unchallenged empire in Turkey. In those days, the Asiatic lion still roamed free in the wild. Researchers think the lion statues were carved by different sculptors. One of them was made to be very lifelike, with its muscles bulging and its tail curved around the back of the massive boulder. The other one is a little less realistic. Both were clearly made by people who had seen lions in real life. Sadly, the lions were blown up with dynamite. Looters got to them before archaeologists, thinking they had treasure in them. The damage is making it even more difficult for researchers to figure out what the lions were used for. They haven't found any evidence of a Hittite settlement near the sculptures. The sheer size of these things suggests they weren't supposed to be moved very far. It's possible the statues were like guardians, put in place to mark something important. The entrance to a tomb, perhaps, a source of water, or maybe they once stood guard outside the gateway to a palace. Right now, nobody knows. The Egyptians were in Mexico too. Did the Egyptians make it to Mexico? There is a monument in the ancient ruins of Calixtlahuaca that seems to be evidence of Egyptian influences in early Mesoamerican cultures. The monument is called Monument Number 4. I know, archaeologists really need to start coming up with better names. It's a cross-shaped altar that looks exactly like an Egyptian ankh. Well, it doesn't just look like an ankh, it is an ankh. Monument Number 4 is a cross with a loop on the top, a real Egyptian key of life. The ankh represented the idea of eternal life to the Egyptians. You can see it everywhere in Egypt, on temple walls, in tomb paintings, and clutched in the hands of gods and goddesses. The ankh is such a powerful symbol that when Christians needed a symbol of their own to represent Jesus, they stole the ankh from the Egyptians and used it for their own religion. It is one of the oldest symbols in the world. Although the ankh appears frequently in Egypt, it doesn't in Mexico. This is a really rare example of the ankh at a Mesoamerican ruin. When I tell you what the ankh monument was used for, you're going to be both shocked and disturbed. Calixtlahuaca is an amazing archaeological site even without its connection to ancient Egypt. You can visit it for yourself on any trip to the modern city of Toluca. Its history goes back deep into the unknown, making its link to ancient Egypt seem strangely plausible. No one knows when the city was built, but it was likely more than 3,000 years ago. The ancient Matlatzinca ethnic groups of the Toluca Valley said their nomadic ancestors discovered the city already built in 640 BC. Someone had already built the city and disappeared, leaving it for the next culture to take over. That was exactly what happened. The original builders were gone. Then came the Matlatzinca, then the Mexica, then the Aztec. The Aztec destroyed the city in 1476 and rebuilt it in their image. Many of the temples and structures that stand today are relatively new, only around 500 years old. The monument itself is technically something called a tzompantli, a kind of palisade. Many Mesoamerican civilizations used palisades like this in their cities to publicly display human skulls. I told you it was going to get disturbing. Whoever built the ankh-shaped palisade likely had a skull rack on it, a big piece of scaffolding made from long poles. On the rack were the defleshed heads of war captives and sacrifice victims. The stench this thing gave off must have been horrendous. The question I pose to you now is, why the ankh? Why did the Mesoamerican cultures mirror Egyptian cultures? The two civilizations evolved on opposite sides of the Atlantic Ocean, but were weirdly similar with some things. For example, they both built pyramids, they both believed in a complex life after death, and they both prepared their dead for a harrowing journey to the afterlife. They worshipped solar deities, had ritualistic ceremonies, and used the ankh symbol. Some people ask, could Mexico have been populated by an ancient Egyptian colony thousands of years ago? Could Egyptians have been in North America before the Vikings, thousands of years before Columbus? It could explain the similarities. It's not that hard to believe that some Egyptians got on a boat and sailed across the ocean. It's also worth noting that the ankh symbol also appears in Minoan and Mycenaean sites in the Mediterranean, and even on coins found in ancient Cyprus. Wherever Egyptian influence spread, use of the ankh spread too. The Stonehenge of Golan Heights. Have you ever heard of the prehistoric Stonehenge? It's like Stonehenge, but in the Middle East. The ancient megalith stands in a vast plate of nothingness within the Golan Heights. Its secrets are still secrets. Nobody knew the megalith was there until archaeologists were studying aerial surveys taken during the 1967 war. That was when Israel captured the territory from Syria. Archaeologists were like, oh, there's a giant henge in the middle of nowhere. In the years since, excavations have revealed that the prehistoric Stonehenge is one of the oldest and biggest monuments in the Middle East. It was officially given the Arabic name Rujim el-Hiri, which means stone heap of the wildcat. The massive henge is made of 5 concentric circles, the outermost circle being over 500 feet wide. At the very center of the ancient labyrinth-like structure is a burial chamber. I can't talk about the prehistoric Stonehenge without bringing up giants again. Many believe it was used to bury a giant king. A literal giant king. It could have been, nobody knows for sure. The structure is more than 5,000 years old, making it a little older than the Stonehenge most people are familiar with. It took about 40,000 tons of stones to build Rujum el-Hiri, so it wasn't exactly a weekend hobby project. Scientists are amazed by the site, but have no realistic explanations for its existence. They think it was likely built by a nomadic civilization, but which one? From paganism to Christianity. An ancient letter written by a Roman emperor has led archaeologists to a phenomenal discovery in Italy. This unexpected document has helped shed light on the most complex change the Roman Empire ever went through, the change from paganism to Christianity. Douglas Boyne and his team of archaeologists uncovered an ancient Roman temple from the era of Emperor Constantine. It's believed Constantine was the first ruler of Rome to officially become Christian, transforming Europe forever. He made it illegal to persecute Christians. He raised the funds to build new churches. It was Constantine's hardcore belief that spread Christianity to the masses. But what was his real motivation? Was it a belief in God or a lust for power? The newly found temple was built during Constantine's reign between 280 and 337 in what is now the hilltop city of Spello, about 2.5 hours from Rome. It was only found because of a bizarre letter written by Constantine himself. Roughly 1,600 years ago, a group of people living near the capital of the empire received a letter from their emperor. In the letter, Constantine gave the citizens permission to celebrate a religious holiday in their hometown instead of traveling to a faraway town where the official festival was being held. It was like they wanted to stay home for New Year's Eve instead of driving to their in-laws' place. The letter did have one stipulation, though. The townspeople were allowed to celebrate at home on the condition that they built a temple. Not a temple to Christ like you might expect from the new Christian emperor. Constantine wanted the townsfolk to build a temple for worshiping him. Constantine wanted to be a god. What this letter shows is that the conversion from paganism to Christianity didn't happen overnight. It was a long and painful process, one not all emperors were thrilled about. After Julius Caesar died on the Ides of March in 44 BC, the imperial cult began to form. From those days forward, Roman dictators wished to be worshipped as divine entities. The imperial cult was still alive and well when Constantine became a Christian. Just because he was a Christian didn't mean he was about to give up his own cult worshippers. Controlling Christianity gave him power, while remaining pagan in many regards ensured that he would be worshipped alongside Christ by his people. As for the temple, it was only found thanks to this letter. Once Douglas and his team realized there was a temple somewhere in the city, they used underground imaging techniques to locate the ruins. They found it underneath a parking lot. Then they dug up the parking lot, revealing the ancient walls of the place. Douglas said there are other places throughout the ancient Roman world where Christian rulers supported pagan cults. There could be other temples just like this one. For now, the temple to Constantine is the only one of its kind ever found in the Mediterranean. Who was talking in Africa 1.6 million years ago? New research may have just changed the history of human evolution. A recent analysis done by British archaeologist Stephen Mithen has shown that humans may have developed rudimentary language 1.6 million years ago in Africa. This is a big revelation for scientists around the world. Speech, language, and basic communication were the things that made human evolution possible. The first humans to practice language weren't Homo sapiens. They likely weren't Neanderthals either. They were what people today would consider primitive forms of early humanoids. Until recently, experts in human evolution believe people started speaking 200,000 years ago. To put that into perspective, Homo sapiens appeared about 300,000 years ago. It was thought that we didn't just exist with the ability to speak. We had to work it out over a really long time. Professor Mithen's new research has turned this previously accepted theory on its head. He believes language is 8 times older. One of his pieces of evidence is the human brain itself. Something crazy happened in 2 million BC. The size of the human brain, human as in hominin, increased rapidly. Over a period of 500,000 years, human brains swelled in size while the internal structure remapped and reorganized itself. It was like a mutation and fast forward. The frontal lobe appeared out of nowhere, growing in the human brain like a tumor. As you might know, the frontal lobe is what's responsible for language production and comprehension. Stephen Mithen thinks the frontal lobe grew out of an earlier structure that allowed primitive humans to communicate through hand and arm gestures. At the same time the frontal lobe emerged, so did advanced bipedalism. Early humans stopped lumbering around like apes and started walking upright. There were also changes in the shape of the human skull. That was likely because the brain was growing so big it needed a new shell to hold it. The archaeological record shows that around the same time all these changes were taking place, humans were getting weak. Our inherent weakness likely corresponded to the rise in our advanced communication techniques. Humans couldn't defend themselves physically from monsters of the Ice Age like saber-toothed tigers and giant bears, but they could coordinate and organize, which was better than being strong. This was how humans started hunting 2 million years ago. What a coincidence! All the evidence points to language being the key factor in all these changes. From that point on, language only became more complex and sophisticated. This YouTube video is the culmination of 2 million years of language development. Even knowing this, only part of the mystery is solved. There is still the biggest question of all that scientists seem hopeless to answer. And that question is, why did our brains suddenly grow a frontal lobe? That's the big mystery. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. If the pyramid was a battery, what was it charging? Let me know what you think in the comments.
Be sure to hit that subscribe button and stick around for an older video you might have missed. King Kufu of Egypt. Artifacts from the era of the great King Kufu, also known as the Pharaoh Cheops, have been discovered in a residential neighborhood in the Egyptian city of Cairo. Pharaoh Kufu is remembered as the one who commissioned the construction of the Great Pyramid of Giza, and is rumored to have been buried inside. He was the second pharaoh of the 4th dynasty and ruled during ancient Egypt's golden age, so any artifacts related to him are extremely exciting. These artifacts date back to the 26th century BC, about 4,500 years ago. This particular neighborhood was once part of the grand Egyptian city of Heliopolis, where the ancients worshipped sun deities. Even more amazing is that the archaeologists also discovered the ruined foundations of a sun temple. The artifacts recovered from the era of King Kufu are giant stone blocks made of granite, shaped into the form of sphinxes. The other finds come from a wide variety of different times, all the way from ancient Egypt to the Roman period, and even as recently as the Ottoman period. The Temple of the Sun dates back to the New Kingdom of the 16th century to the 11th century. With all this evidence put together, researchers can confidently say that for about 800 years, some of the most important Egyptian kings ruled from this city, which is now completely buried under modern Cairo. Then, for another 3,000 or so years, the city continued to flourish until it just kind of got swept underneath the modern world. Egyptian demons. An Egyptologist based out of Belgium recently discovered what appears to be the oldest depiction of a demon anywhere in ancient Egypt. This depiction dates back 4,000 years and is proof that demonic entities have been plaguing the Egyptian consciousness for time immemorial. These demons were presented at the International Conference on Ancient Egyptian Demonology. That actually sounds like a fun conference, right? Wael Sherbini, a specialist in ancient religious texts, discovered 2 demons painted on a pair of Middle Kingdom coffins. and a third portrayed on an ancient leather roll that had been procured from somewhere unknown, then lost on a shelf in the Egyptian Museum for 70 years. The roll of leather is the oldest and longest Egyptian manuscript made of leather ever found, and it has a demon on it. The demons on the coffins are known as Intep and Cherry Benut. The first is pictured as a dog-baboon hybrid, while the second is some kind of strange anthropomorphic figure with a human head. The demons were likely part of a whole horde of demons, designed to protect the burial chamber where the two coffins were found. Text within the ancient Egyptian building is linked to the moon god Thoth, so the demons could have something to do with him. Unfortunately, there were no accompanying texts or other elements that could explain what the demons were doing on the coffins. And as for the third demon that was found on the leather roll, it's called Ikenti. It was a guardian demon that protected a fiery gate and was depicted with the black head of a cat and the body of a large bird. Strange spots in Tutankhamun's tomb. Tutankhamun is without a doubt the most famous of all the great pharaohs who ever ruled ancient Egypt, even though he was only a boy when he became king. In fact, King Tut took the throne from his father Akhenaten when he died around the year 1334 BC, at the age of either 8 or 9. Most of his decisions, seeing as he was literally a child, were made by his advisors. It was his advisors who really wielded the power, with Tut little more than a figurehead. The boy king ruled for roughly 10 years and then died under mysterious circumstances. He was buried in the Valley of the Kings deep in the desert of Egypt and uncovered by the British Egyptologist Howard Carter in the year 1922. When Carter found the tomb, he was a little confused because it didn't seem quite as grand as he had been expecting. Sure, it was a fantastic tomb, but it was unusually small for such an important person. And more recently, something weird was found in the tomb. Black spotty marks have been identified all over the walls of King Tut's tomb, and they appear to be mold. Mold isn't found in any of the other tombs in the valley, and scientists initially thought it was because too many visitors were breathing inside the tomb. When looking at the photos from Carter's expedition, the black spots were already there. And now, according to expert Adam Lowe, the mold probably came because the tomb was sealed before the paint had a chance to dry. This is all very strange and suggests that King Tut's tomb was rushed. The painters who decorated the tomb had to abandon the project before the paint had even dried, meaning something major was going on, and someone in charge wanted that tomb shut and sealed immediately. Big shout out to Jesse and Regina. Thanks so much for watching and supporting Origins Explained. If you are new here, be sure to subscribe and join the Origins Explained family. Egyptian dinosaur. A team of Egyptian paleontologists have just discovered a dinosaur in the Egyptian desert that looks an awful lot like a T-Rex. According to Egypt's Mansoura University, the dinosaur bones were found in the Bahariya Oasis, located deep in the western desert of Egypt. The fossil of this mysterious carnivorous beast was found in solid deposits of iron and sand. It actually took several years of detailed study to figure out what dinosaur the bone belonged to, and even what the bone was. It turned out to be the 10th cervical vertebra of a massive predatory dinosaur belonging to the family of dinosaurs, Abelisauridae. This dinosaur was originally named after the Argentinian scientist Roberto Abel, but the creature is distinguished by just how terrifying it is. These dinosaurs had sharp teeth that looked like broken knife blades, massive muscles in their hind feet to help them lurch forward and attack, and they looked like creepier, meaner versions of the T-Rex. Newly discovered tombs. A series of entirely new tombs have recently been found in Egypt, and they are even older than the pyramids. These tombs are 5,000 years old, dating to the first intermediate eras of Egypt, to the oldest kingdom to rule the land even before the days of the mightiest pharaohs. In total, researchers found 5 ancient tombs hiding in the mysterious city of Saqqara. They date back to approximately 2700 BC. These things are so old that the Romans would have looked at them like we look at ruins from the Romans. Only the Romans for us were 2,000 years ago, while these tombs were 3,000 years old when the Roman Empire first took Egypt. Let that sink in for a minute. The tombs were excavated near the Great Pyramid of Merenre, which itself was built in the 6th dynasty. They were found at the bottom of deep burial shafts, in huge underground chambers decorated with colorful funerary scenes. Each tomb contained a limestone sarcophagus and was decorated with offering tables and typical funerary artifacts. Thanks to being able to easily decipher the ancient Egyptian writing, we know the names of most of the dead. There were government officials, both men and women, a priest, a grand priestess, and an overseer. Amazingly, we can still see their names written on the walls, like Henu and Pepi, helping to bring these ancient people lost in the past back to life, which was the whole purpose of their tombs in the first place. Egyptian notepads. An absolutely monumental discovery has been made in the lost city of Athribis, located in central Egypt. Researchers have discovered the biggest collection of notepads from the ancient world since archaeology really took off at the beginning of the 20th century. In total, researchers have cataloged upwards of 18,000 ancient Egyptian notepads. Of course, these aren't notepads like you would buy now. They weren't made of paper, but pieces of pottery used by students. These scraps of pottery are known as ostraka, and they were way cheaper and far more accessible than papyrus. And so, students at school would use these pieces of pottery to write down things just like you probably did in school. Math problems, alphabet exercises, lists of numbers and dates, and all kinds of stuff. It's pretty amazing to see that even thousands of years ago, students were busy solving math problems and practicing their alphabet. We have a lot more in common with ancient Egyptians than we probably thought. One of the more unusual things found was a Bart Simpson-type punishment. A bad child appears to have been disciplined by being forced to write the same thing over and over again on scraps of pottery. Ancient recipe. Archaeologists have done something a little out of the ordinary. They used an actual recipe from the days of ancient Egypt to make their very own olive oil. The use of olive oil goes back thousands and thousands of years. The Romans used it, the Greeks, and the Phoenicians. In truth, making olive oil is really easy. Emlyn Dodd, an archaeologist at the British School at Rome, wanted to use the torsion method to make olive oil, which was created by the Egyptians about 4,600 years ago. First, olives are crushed and put inside a permeable bag. Sticks are then shoved into either end of the bag and twisted in opposite directions. This compresses the bag and filters out the liquid. It's wildly simple and was used first by the Egyptians and remained in use all the way until the 20th century in Italy. The earliest example of the torsion method for extracting olive oil was found in the tomb of Nebi Makhet from the year 2600 BC. King Tut's grandfather. Archaeologists unearthed the crumbling remains of two giant sphinxes at a mysterious temple in the city of Luxor. His statues are positively immense, each one about 26 feet in length. They were discovered partly submerged in water at an old and abandoned shrine to Amenhotep III. If you're not sure who that is, he was the grandfather of King Tut. The artifacts were discovered by German and Egyptian researchers while they were busy restoring the ancient funerary temple. This place is called the Temple of Millions of Years, although it's already in pretty bad shape after just over 3,000 years. They also came across a trio of black granite busts of the ancient Egyptian goddess of war, Sekhmet. She took the form of a fierce lioness and was the most favored and beloved god of soldiers and generals. The lead archaeologist on the project, Haurig Saruzian, said the artifacts were discovered near an old ceremonial road that was used for celebrations during King Tut's grandfather's ruling years. The celebration started when Amenhotep reached his 30th year as the king of all Egypt, and then continued every 3 years just to celebrate the fact that he was still alive. Amenhotep III managed to live all the way to 40, which was practically unheard of for pharaohs of the day. And during those last 10 years, the celebrations that happened here were the biggest parties you could find in Egypt, with feasting, sacrifice, and offerings being made to the great gods. The dazzling Aten. The biggest discovery in modern Egyptology was that of a lost city, found just 2 years ago in 2020 during the Panini. Some have hailed it as the biggest discovery since Tutankhamun, while some say it's even bigger. It's an entire city, not just a couple of buildings. A whole lost metropolis that was literally buried under the Egyptian sand and had to be dug out. The city goes by many different names, but is primarily known as either the dazzling Aten, The rise of Aten, or just Aten. It was found on the western bank of the Nile, hidden near the Theban necropolis not far from Luxor. The city was named after the sun god Aten and was abandoned for unknown reasons. Because it was deserted so abruptly and nobody ever went back to living in it, this city just kind of faded into obscurity. This great shining city was actually standing during the reign of the pharaoh I just told you about, Amenhotep III. The earliest inscription found within the ruins is 1337 BC, but it could be even older than that. This city was built 3,400 years ago, when Egypt was at its wealthiest. After the death of Amenhotep III, this city was abandoned abruptly and for no apparent reason. The capital of ancient Egypt was moved to Amarna, 250 miles to the north. Dinosaur footprints. In Egypt's eastern desert, massive dinosaur footprints have been found embedded in the ground. This discovery is brand new and the first of its kind in Egypt. The footprints, which belong to both carnivores and herbivores, date back over 70 million years. We already know there was a huge population of predatory dinosaurs in the western desert. Now, thanks to researchers from the Vertebrate Paleontology Center at New Valley University and Cairo University, we know there were also giant dinosaurs in the eastern desert. The only issue is that we don't know exactly which dinosaurs or what the landscape really looked like here. If it was anything like the desert to the west, this was probably a place rich in biodiversity, a hot jungle instead of a dry and barren desert. Researchers found 16 individual dinosaur footprints stamped into Nubian sandstone. They have estimated the size of the dinosaurs to be anywhere from 1,000 to 2,000 pounds, so they probably stood upwards of 16 feet tall. They also identified carnivore tracks, animals that walked on two legs, and four-legged herbivore tracks. These dinosaurs must have lived in the desert in the last few million years of the age of dinosaurs, before the asteroid came from the heavens and wiped them all out. Thanks for watching! Remember to subscribe, and I'll see you next time for another video on ancient history.